What's up everyone, Skobie1, you're watching the Beat Somm, and today we're talking about bass. So what is bass? Bass is the lower section of the audio spectrum that humans can hear. So when you hear a sound and you think of it as bass, it is in the lower section of the 20 to 20K sound range that a human can hear. So when we talk about bass, we talk about two different kinds of bass: sub bass and regular bass. Sub bass is from 20 to 60, and then regular bass is 60 to 250. So when we talk about bass, we talk about thin bass, thick bass, deep bass, wide bass. These are all determined on the frequency of the bass sound that you're hearing. So hip-hop is typically made with 808 type basses. Those are sub bass and mid bass. They can get into the higher end bass, but not most of the time. It's normally sub or normal bass when you're working with 808s. And the higher we go up the audio spectrum, we get into the low mid range, which is 250 to 500 hertz. And these are the lower ends of most instruments. A guitar, piano, those type of instruments have a low mid range, and when you hear those notes, that's what you're hearing. Alright, enough technical shit. Let's talk about bass and how to get it to sit in the mix better. So with bass, you generally need some EQ, some compression, and some saturation. These three plugins, these three effects will help us control the bass and make it sound the way we want it to. So a lot of modern hip-hop, a lot of modern music uses EQ to boost the bass end so that the bottom end of the bass comes through the mix. A lot of dance music has a dip in the middle so that the two ends of the bass sound come through. So there's the high end and the low end. So when we mix bass into our tracks, we use the compression to boost the signal in. We use EQ to change the frequencies in the bass tone to mix into our song. So you can give a curve in the middle, at the end, at the top. That way we control the sound and how it mixes into the track. Saturation is kind of a distortion, so that will take and add a slightly distorted effect to the bass, allowing, you know, to make it dirtier if that's what you're trying to do. What programs do we use to create our bass sounds? I use Massive from Native Instruments. That's my go-to when I'm making bass. You can use Hadez Drums. That's a 808 based sound. There are a ton more, but they all really do the same thing. Just find one you're comfortable with and run with it. So depending on the digital audio workstation you're using, there are a lot of plugins and presets in those workstations that you can use to better mix your sound. If you're using Fruity Loops, you can use the Sound Goodizer. That will help you get a nice happy mix with the bass. If you're not using Fruity Loops, there's another plugin called Fattener from Data Life. They are awesome. It's just like the Sound Goodizer from FL Studio. It does the same thing. It mixes compression and saturation in one knob. That'll help you get a nice fat and warm bass sound. You can also use Waves Driver. That'll help you get the same kind of effect. There's so many things out there. You just got to try them all and figure out which one you like the best, because that's just all that matters. So what am I using these days? These days I'm using a lot of Universal Audio Sounds because their plugins are just beyond anything I can imagine. It's very good. I love what comes out of them. I use a lot of 1176, which is a compressor. I use some Neve and SSL effects chains. It's just, I love what Universal Audio does, so if you have the money, check them out. I can't steer you wrong with them. When writing a bass line, the simpler the better, because bass is supposed to be a complement to the rest of the song. So you don't want your bass to be the most important part of the song, but it's got to stand out, especially in hip-hop. It's got to be there and present. Okay, so that's my quick tip on bass. If you got any questions, you can email me, Skobie@skobie1.com. Thank you for watching. Skobie1, the Beat Somm. Peace.